Hey everyone, here is the link, the page that I'm going to speak to. This one update's going to be a little different format than what we typically do. I don't need to go through component by as I usually do because I'm going to talk very specifically about what our sprint goals are and the things that went into this week's release of RNode 9.7. So with that, you should know we started Sprint 31 this week. It's slated to end June 10th, and some of the highlights of these priorities. Include for the consensus team building that foundation for bonding and unbonding in Rolang that will then be used to implement the validation protocol for economics and incentives. We are continuing the investigation of increase in time to propose that we have observed previously on both the public and internal test nets. Pavel is almost done. There's a PR in review as of today related to the removal of the faucet. This is a heads up. If you're a DApp developer and you are currently relying on the faucet in the code and the platform, that is going to be removed. It will absolutely not be available to you by the release of RNode 9.8. There are other ways that you can go about providing tokens. We recommend funding a wallet at Genesis. That's the best way to do that. But if you're currently using the faucet, please know that it will go away with Node 9.8. And if you need support to figure out different ways of funding deployments, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via Discord, or you're welcome to DM me if this will pose a problem to you. Also, we are starting work on the property-based testing for the estimator. The Node team continues to provide a number of UX improvements and optimizations and investigate somewhat old bugs. We haven't had any new bugs coming into Node, but we're trying to clear the backlog of any other old bugs that are there. And then we are also actually we're well underway and almost in fact wrapping up the work related to introducing the fairness property to the COM layer. And so this should help resolve some of the challenges we've observed connecting to a busy network. This is something that once those PRs are in, we will definitely run a community test with, because this is the place where we have observed that problem most frequently. So I anticipate being able to do that with the testing session, not this week, but next week. The Rolang team is continuing work to bridge cost accounting with all of the components and deliver cost accounting and the utility token to the platform. I'll speak more explicitly about that in just a second. We have completion of some foundational work for the multi-sig, and then the next step after that work is done and after Artur is freed up with the cost accounting bridge will be to pivot and start working on multi-sig. And then Joe continues to investigate bugs related to Rolang. Finally, the RSpace team, they give a big cheer. We now have the new RSpace running by default in the dev branch. This will be a part of the next release, RNode 9.8. And just really very pleased with how the new RSpace is performing in our development networks as well as in the public testnet, and ready to have that run by default and take out the old RSpace. So that'll be that's a nice way to round out and cap off that work. And with that, Wukash is moving over towards the implementation of soft checkpointing, which is part of our optimization work. And then Dom is moving off of the bloat analysis for Rolang. We've kind of reached a tipping point there and have done a number of optimizations that went into the 9.7 release, understand what some others might be, but what we really need him to do right now is to move over to the implementation of Peak. And so with this sprint, the goal is the foundational work for the Peak implementation. Let's see what else. So we did release 9.7 this week. If you are a Node user, please take a look at this release plan. There's a big breaking change related to our completion of the migration of the algorithm that we use for public-private key pairs. We are now using across the platform the SEC P256K1 algorithm. This will be a breaking change for you if you have if you're putting content onto the chain and then using your key to pull it off. You can use the keygen feature to generate the SEC P256K1 key pair. and that will allow you to use the platform successfully. We do know there's a bug in Keygen, and actually it's fixed in dev, but we haven't released it yet. But if you do choose to use Keygen, or when you are using the password to access your encrypted key, which is also a new feature of 9.7, you may, if you are, depending on what type of operating system you use, you may experience an error where you lose the ability to see what you're typing on the console. There is a link to that bug ticket in the release plan. Do take a look because it describes a workaround that works quite nicely. And then we're looking forward to providing you with the bug fix that I played with yesterday, and it absolutely resolved my issues. So that bug fix will be coming in soon. Trying to think. Those were the big changes for the 9.7 release. But if you're an active Node user, especially if you're a dApp developer, do take a look at the release plan and learn more about the changes that went into that release, because some of them do absolutely affect you. We do plan to release 9.8 the week of June 24th, and that work is in progress. So a lot of the work that I talked about in the sprint is going to be in that release. Testnet is up. It is currently running 9.7. And there's information on the testnet channel in Discord to help you get started with that if you need some support. We do plan to run a community test tomorrow at 1400 UTC. We will be exploring some of the new features of 9.7 and talking about some upcoming changes. And as always, addressing questions and helping you get started with Node. So all are welcome there. Any questions about the sprint plan or the recent release of 9.7? Okay, let's shift over then. I want to talk a little bit about some of the blockers to testnet too. I'm getting a fair amount of questions in Discord about this. So as a reminder, if you go to the RChain public testnet information page, you will see not only a roadmap of what our plan is for the upcoming versions of testnet, but also information about what might block those. And so you can see all of the things that are currently blocking the delivery of the launch of testnet 2 in RChain 3168. You're welcome to take a look at that. But you know, the overall biggest blocker right now is the ability to charge for deploys, which is cost accounting on the platform. And where we are right now with that is Artur has done a tremendous amount of work to bridge all the components together to bring that up. And what he's finding, what he reported in stand-ups last week, is that what we are seeing are every second deploy is creating conflicts. And we do not have full block merging implemented at this point. We had not, as part of our planning and estimation, we had not anticipated that we would need either fully block merging or peak related to the successful delivery of cost accounting. But what we know now is that we absolutely do need peak in order to deliver cost accounting on the platform. And what peak is the ability to look at a value without logging a change. This work wasn't planned. We do understand what peak is, however, and we do have an estimate of about 3 weeks to deliver peak to help unblock the delivery of cost accounting to the platform. So that's a fairly significant blocker to the launch of testnet 2. And at this point, we understand what the issue is. We've estimated the work, and that work has absolutely started in Sprint 31. The other thing I want to speak to are the risks to code completion for Mercury. Obviously, with the addition of the peak implementation, which was not previously a requirement for Mercury, this is something new. It extends the scope of what we had planned to do between now and being code complete for Mercury. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, we now know, related to Dom's investigation of bloat in the tuple space related to rolling, that we do need to take some additional steps, do some additional work to manage and reduce the rolling garbage that we see in the tuple space. The good news there is Dom and Artur spent some significant time early this week. They understand what needs to be done. All of that work is ticketed. We do have, it's not hinging on any one person. Anybody on the rolling team can pick this up. So we feel confident in our ability to understand the work and to source it out, but that is also additional new work that will impact our delivery on code completion for Mercury. Any questions there?
Yeah, Kelly, on that last point about reducing the rolling garbage in the tuple space, is there an estimated amount of time that's going to take?
Not yet. We have the guys delivered the tickets the other day. We know of one, and one of these tickets is in the current sprint, but there are several others that we have not estimated yet.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thanks for the time.
Actually, Kelly, uh, maybe it's useful to have a discussion of, or just a like a preview discussion of what we're talking about with respect to listen for data at name.
I agree with that. And if Chris, are you on the call?
Okay, so what we can do is we can set up some time next week to talk about that. But
Well, I'll say this. At this point, we had, as we discussed in stand up today, and we've now covered this issue in the past two consecutive stand ups. The team is working together to kind of there were two proposals on the table coming into today's stand up. We talked in the stand up today and are kind of coalescing around one, but the action item after that stand up was to uh, make sure that we've fully capture that new proposal or that consolidation of proposals into the document, and then make sure that the team agrees that that's what it is. So I do expect that we would be there and ready to share that document this time next week. But if you have, if you want any details on kind of where we're landing, I do observe that Chris is on the call. He might be able to lend those.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get to my mute button fast enough. Just to add a little bit to what you just said, Kelly, for developers, the listen for data at name changes that we're thinking about are not significantly different than sort of the developer experience that we have today. The one major change is we're going to provide a mechanism for looking up basically the unforgeable names that you might be interested, and also having a way to um, signal in your contract unforgeable names you want to listen to. And then we'll be making some modifications to how you actually see the changes to those unforgeable names by outputting the updates to the tuple space. So that's kind of high level agreement around how we're going to modify the listen for data at name and the approach we're going to take. And if you have any questions with that, we can discuss it in more detail.
Yeah, so I just want to add just a little bit of color. So essentially, in big sort of block diagram style architecture, we're suggesting that the best way to get data out of the node is via a read-only node, and then if you want, but the data comes in a format that's not as readily pre-digested as applications might want. And so for that, we're suggesting that there's for that sort of pre-digested stuff, there's a way to integrate that with any of a number of indexing and subscription services such as Kafka. In fact, I've been contemplating another integration with Rabbit, where the unforgeable names become a topic in a Rabbit exchange. So there are lots of different ways that we might plug this into existing consumption patterns that dApps are useful for, but we're backing down from that should be the how the co-op delivers the data, right? So we're essentially modularizing this into layers. So there's a not quite as friendly form that it mostly matches what we've already got, but with the right sort of semantics, in the sense that when the application sees the data, they unless they've said otherwise, this data is coming as a result of the finalization. So it's not unless we say otherwise, that they have a sense that the data is actually there. So hopefully that gives a kind of a feel for the intentions around the API. Does that sort of match your intuitions, Chris?
Yeah, that fills in a lot of context as well. Yes.
Good. Yeah, because in some sense, I hope that people understand that, um, on the one hand, this is providing more reasons for the existence of the read-only nodes in the ecosystem. And the more rationale there is, the more likely they are, on the one hand, to not be lied to by the other validators, and also to be financially supported by the wider ecosystem. Right. Essentially, we want there to be we want these read-only nodes to actually be considered an important part of the ecosystem, so they do get the data, and that they are economically supported by the larger ecosystem. So this sort of helps support that position, and it also modularizes the architecture. So we're not having the node take on too many features and functions, and we let there be a healthy ecosystem grow up around that. So hopefully that any questions from the community about that? Does that make sense? Any DApp developers or would-be DApp developers that have a opinion about this? Okay, then I guess we'll move on to other items of business. So first and foremost, the board had a special meeting, voted unanimously to the term sheet that was put forward. I will post that later today for the member sale. So that's those we had overall agreements, as we've already had some sales because they were within the parameters spec'd out by the term sheet, but people should be aware that the sale is now ongoing and will last through the end of testnet 3. And every time we get out of a testnet phase, the price changes. There is a discount structure for bulk purchases. So we've sort of, there was demand before from several members for a lower price point for entry. So we have halved the price point for entry, but then provided some incentives to come in at bulk purchases. So there's a discount structure that will be available and detailed in the term sheet, which we will put forward. Good news. I'll talk about this in a lot more detail in the closed member session, but Thrust Capital is still very much on board. They've sort of put forward reiterated their position and want to move forward with that, and I'll talk about the details of that on the closed member session. But in our ongoing communications, they have reiterated that they want to put even more than the promised 1.75 in, but up to 2 million before considering the next deal. So I'll talk more about that and the details in the closed door session. Additionally, the Chinese community has been working tirelessly to support RChain, and we're now in contact with another VC that has expressed some considerable interest. But I won't talk too much more about that until we're further into discussions. I will say that it's a company that we talked to in 2017. And has close ties to the Ethereum network. But that's about all I can say for now until we're actually into those discussions. But it's great to be receiving business development leads from the community rather than having to do this entirely ourselves. So in addition, in terms of board activities, the board interviewed Justin Long today for a position on the board and potentially a position as an officer. Justin, are you on the call? I don't know if you made it. Okay, I think maybe Justin didn't make it to the call or he had to jump off. Justin Long is someone that I've known for about 5 years. And he has a lot of experience in the industry and has been working quite a bit with the industry sector. And the industry sector is very, very much where we would like our chain technology to be applied. If you recall, at the top of this year, one of our board members attended the co-op, the Electrical Co-ops Association, and there was considerable interest in RChain and potentially developing some kind of pilot project. On the RChain side, we just haven't had the cycles to pursue that. But now, if we have someone who has connections in the industry and has an interest in pursuing that, that's a really that would be a good fit. Justin also has some really interesting ideas about a range of other potential applications for RChain, and has a keen interest in helping to drive those. So he would be a great interim board member. We're in the process of setting up interviews for a member of the Chinese community with the board. When those go further forward, I'll let you know more about that. Um, any questions about any of the things that I've said so far? Okay, I guess silence is golden. Let me just double check that people can hear me.
Hey, Greg, sorry
Yeah.
about that. I was actually listening in on YouTube. I realized the Zoom link went to my spam inbox.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, Justin. It's good to hear you on the community call. Why don't you say a few words about yourself and your interest in RChain?
Oh yeah, well, no, I really appreciate you having me here. So as you mentioned, I right now work in artificial intelligence. So specifically deep learning for enterprise, and I'm really passionate about the environment. I'm a dual citizen, so I live here in Canada. I'm from the U.S. And I've actually been following Greg for years. I consider Greg a longtime mentor. Um, so I think the fact that you now have a blockchain that is highly scalable for fast transactions is extremely interesting to me, especially some of the problems that I've personally worked on in anti-fraud. So uh, I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. We're looking forward to having you join the co-op. I think that would be really beneficial. Go ahead, please.
Addressing the government sector of applications. Is that correct?
Sorry, my line of work.
Jim, did you say government or governance?
Government sector of RChain applications. Is that something that Justin is you're pursuing, or did I?
I think I think that's to be determined. But in terms of my current line of work, I do anti-fraud in financial and telecom industries.
Thank you for straightening me out.
Yeah, awesome. This is great. So speaking of anti-fraud, blockchain is great for tracking tracking fraud. We've been just so people are aware. I'll speak more to the details of this um, uh, on the closed door session on Friday. But we have been tracking the movement both from the scammers wallets and from the Pythia wallets. So we're aware. As of Friday, I sent a notification to KuCoin, and shortly on the heels of that, we'll send notification out to the other exchanges with respect to the co-op's position on Pythia. We believe that Pythia may have sold some rocks to a member of the co-op. We'll give them the same kind of notification. More details on that in the closed door session. But with respect to fraud, it's quite interesting. I've sort of had hands-on experience here in terms of how useful the blockchain is for tracking fraudulent behavior. It's been really quite eye-opening and very encouraging for us. And a lot of kudos to Christian and to a lot of the community members, especially the Chinese community members, for keeping us apprised of movement of fraudulent the tokens that have been involved in fraudulent behavior. So thanks very much to that. We are on top of it, but don't hesitate if you notice any activity with respect to the addresses. Please let us know, and don't worry if I say yes, we're on top of it. That just means it means it's a hearty thank you, and we're tracking it too. But it's just like if you're driving in a car and you notice something, go ahead and speak out, even if the driver may be aware. It's better to speak out than to not. So thank you again for everyone's efforts there. Let's see. I think I've covered everything. We will be terminating our relationship with Immersion, so we will not be paying any further license fees to Immersion. I have received the paperwork yesterday, reviewing it, and hopefully we'll be executing it before the end of the week. So I'll give more details about that in the closed door session, and sort of what the implications are. And then as of this morning, I executed the declarations so that Martin Davis and Andrea Louie and Jared Vermillion can get the final paperwork out to the DFI on time to their deadlines. So hopefully that satisfies them. We've done everything in our power to make sure that they have all the documentation they've requested, and actually very grateful for all of the diligence that we've had to go through, even though it's meant quite a heavy load on everyone that's been involved. So any questions about the points that I've covered to date? Okay. Silence is golden. Thanks to everyone for their engagement. Oh, I will mention that Steve Frost Talbot is driving making sure that the governance committee is appropriately constituted. We do have a candidate, actually a couple of candidates in the hopper for the board appointed position that needs to be there in order for the governance committee to be appropriately staffed. So that's underway, and once that's underway, then we can go ahead and address some of the governance proposals. But we need to make sure that the committee is appropriately constituted before those proposals can be fully embraced. But the board is very supportive of the proposals. With that, unless there are any other questions or concerns, really
yes. Yeah. Will a representative of the working group on setting that up be attending tomorrow's governance committee meeting? Governance working group, meeting.
Yeah. So I will not be. If you can wrangle either Evan or Steve or Ian to do that, to fill those shoes, that would be one way to handle it.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, folks. Have a good rest of your week. Yes.
I'm prepared to give the slashing demo if you wanted it.
Oh, yes, indeed. I'm sorry. Thank you for speaking up. Please. Let's do it.
All right. Let me share my screen then. Can everyone see that?
Yep, I can.
Yes.
So the demo I'm about to give is related to slashing. And so a broad overview is if you are a validator on the chain and you do something faulty, which means producing an invalid block or equivocating, and if you publish that out to the network, then you can get penalized by another validator for doing such actions. And so specifically, the demo I'm about to show it involves two validators, and one of them is proper and the second one is faulty. And so I'm going to first just delete all my previous stuff and then launch a proper Bootstrap node. So let's let that load, and let's see. All right. So yeah, give it a few more seconds. So here I have a script, rnode deploy propose. Basically what this does is it creates a deploy that will push the short fast Erlang contract to.
We're not seeing the correct window if you're typing.
Oh. Did I? Oh. 1 second. There we go. All right. So the based on this message, can you see my screen now? By the way, just to make sure.
Yes, we
Yes,
see that.
we can.
Okay, great. Just so this line tells you that the Bootstrap node is running, and I was saying before we're gonna push short fast to this Bootstrap node, and we'll let that run. So what I'm doing right now is just normal node processing. I just want to make sure that the Bootstrap is indeed up and properly processing requests. So we received the deploy data and we've added the block. So all looks good. So now let's introduce the faulty node. So I've built a modified version of the node that will produce invalid blocks. Specifically, this one bumps the deploy count by 100. So even if there's only one deploy inside a block, it will say that there's 101. And so if we make a propose to this faulty node, or a deploy and then a propose to this faulty node, it will create a block with a incorrect deploy count. And so let me just check that. So we've received the proof block. It's still processing it, and yes, it is now running. So we can now execute this deploy propose on the faulty node A. And if you're curious, the way I differentiate is, one is this number is the ID of the faulty node, and 0 is the ID of the Bootstrap here. So that went. So it created the block 2, and it sent it to the Bootstrap node. And here we can see that the Bootstrap node has indeed recognized the fact that the deploy count does not match the number of deploys, because there's only one deploy in this block, but the deploy count set 101, as I explained before. And so what this means is the next time the Bootstrap creates a block, the faulty node A will be slashed. And just to make sure that that the slashing did indeed happen, I'm just going to show you before I do the next deploy propose, I'm going to show you the, oh, I need to add a depth flag. Actually, one second. Let me just pick out this first block. So if I do a show block on the first block I proposed on the Bootstrap, it will show the bonds validator list here. And so we can see that, we haven't done any slashing yet. So we have all the validators and their corresponding stake amounts, 5, 4, 2, 1, 3. Specifically, keep an eye on this one. This is the ID of the faulty node here. And so the next time we, as I mentioned, propose on the Bootstrap, what I'll do is, in addition to deploying this short fast, it will deploy a slashing deploy. And so what this slashing deploy will do is it will take all the validators who have produced invalid blocks and slash them. So let's see, was the block number 2 created? Yep. So if we take a look at this block now, we'll see that the bonds validator list has an updated entry where the faulty validator from here has a bond of 0. And so this means that this means that the faulty validator is slashed, and because any block that builds on this block will have will copy this bonds validator list or copy and modify if there's any slashing deploys in addition to this. But essentially it will build off of this bonds validator list. And so all future, or the feature of the chain that stems from this one will always have this faulty validator as a stake of 0. And so with that, this demo is concluded.
That was awesome, Kent. Thank you very much. Any questions from anyone about the demo? Well, I have some questions. So is the PR merged?
Yes, the PR is merged. This is off dev.
It's in dev.
It's in dev. That's awesome. That's great news. That's really good. So we're making some considerable progress. This is fantastic. Thanks so much for the demo, and that is definitely a high note to end on. Thanks to everyone, and looking forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.